home. Standard Bank, the greatest bank by assets, we also recently announced a major growth in its earnings, and it has been announced as well as a bank where a lot of young people in our country would like to work at. So to that end, I thought it appropriate to invite the man who's at the helm, driving this very big ship, Mr. Sim Tshabalala. A very warm welcome to you, and we're very pleased to have you on the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mbali. Thank you for the privilege.
So I just want to go back a bit, right? And just get a bit of insight on your youth days. So as a young person and person of color back in your days, did you ever imagine that this is where you would land up?
Mbali, absolutely not. I was active in SASCO back then, and I intended to become a human rights lawyer. I had no interest in financial services. And I think, I was ambitious and I wanted to make a difference as a lawyer at the time, given where the country was at in the 1980s and 1990s.
Yeah.
But I was absolutely not focused on financials. While I was at varsity, I admired people like Judge Albie Sachs, and all those great lawyers at the time. And I wanted to be like them. And in fact, when I completed my degree and started my articles, I actually interrupted my articles and went to the University of Notre Dame to do a master's in human rights. So I got an LLM. And the fact of the matter is that law in itself is not just an abstraction, right? It's one of the most important sources of freedom and flourishing.
Absolutely.
And I actually continue to see the law in that way, just like the dismal science.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was not interested in banking at the time. I was very much interested in
it was never
profession.
Wow, it was never in your radar. That's absolutely great how it all turned out. I just also want to know, is there anything that you wish you had known in your younger years? So leading up to this point now where you are, in your life, has there been anything that you wish you had learned very soon and very early in your life?
So I'll give you two things. You ask for one, you get two from a banker, right? The first one is just make sure that you understand that you can't keep everybody happy. It's just not possible. You just can't keep everybody happy, but you should always treat everybody with respect. Can't keep everybody happy, but you've got to treat them with respect. And as you grow in your profession or your job or whatever, whether you become an academic or a professional person or even a business person or an NGO person, just remember that the goal is to be effective and not to be popular. And then secondly, I think you got to stop asking yourself how you can avoid making mistakes. Life should be about, figuring out what's possible and living out those possibilities, right? Rather than not making mistakes. Go out there, gather information intelligently, have a set of values, live by those values, and strive for greater things better than yourself.
Mr. Sim, I think it's great that you speak about, the freedom to make mistakes, because I think especially now with the younger generation, our generation, there's a very huge emphasis on doing things right the first time and very quickly, instant gratification is the thing with like the youth now. And I think, it's very impactful that someone that so much of the youth look up to, saying those words and advising in that sort of way. So thank you so much for those beautiful, lessons that you've just shared with us.
Can I just give you another lesson, but another important lesson? Please call me Sim or Simpiwa. Don't call me Mr. Sim. That's like makes me sound ancient.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
I'm not that ancient.
I should have asked in the beginning of the interview, but it's okay. It's okay. Thank you, Sim.
It's okay to call me Sim. Quite all right.
So leading up to the next question, right? I just want to know, are there any sort of like key ingredients that you feel have made it possible for you to land this far? So any things that you like sort of carried out with you? I know you've just shared like two major lessons with us now, but I also just want to know, any sort of lessons that you feel like have been positive ingredients in you making it this far and still maintaining your role this far, you know? Can you share with me like some of the key lessons you've learned throughout your career?
So absolutely. So I had the privilege of going to a Catholic school. And a lot of the lessons I learned there, I carry with me. And funny enough, they are best summarized in a book, which should be compulsory reading for everybody. And I do hope that you yourself go and read it and your classmates and colleagues go and read it. It's a book by Chris Lowry, Lowny, sorry, not Lowry, Lowney.
Yeah.
And the book is called Heroic Leadership, Best Practices from a 450-year-old Company That Changed the World. Heroic Leadership, Best Practices from a 450-year-old Company That Changed the World. And it's a book about the Jesuit principles of leadership. So Jesuits, as you know, is a religious order. It's a bunch of Catholic priests, and they're an extraordinary group of people. And they developed these principles 500 years ago, and those principles remain as relevant today as then. They've got 4 leadership principles which I believe in, and I share as often as I can. And the first one is heroism. They say in that context, you must always aim extremely high, right? And don't ever be satisfied with what you've achieved. And the way they put it is that Jesuits always want more. Aim high and always want more. Is indifference, which is a disconcerting concept, right? But what they mean by that is something to the effect that you've got to let go of attachments to possessions or emotions or things, and indeed people, that prevent you from innovating and from achieving your goals, right? So in other words, if your objective requires you to stop what you're doing now and go and do something unfamiliar, then just do it. If the company that I work for says to me, Sim, go and work for us in Lagos, go and do it. And their founder, St. Ignatius Loyola, called it living with 1 foot raised. Can you patient? Living with 1 foot raised. The third one is love, right? Love, but by that they don't mean the ordinary conventional way that we'd all think about the word, right? But what they mean by that roughly is that you got to treat everybody around you, your family, your colleagues, your friends, with respect, and respect all of them. Don't care about superficial differences, but recognize the humanity in everybody and the human potential. And then just help everybody be the best that they can. Every opportunity you get, try and add value to the next person. And then lastly, self-awareness. By that, I think we need, you got to have an action plan, 5 bullet points that you look at every day that help you get to your vision. So those are the 4 things that I've always held dear and I try to live by. And that book that I'm referring to, go and get it. It's really, really cool.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Mr. Sim, you touched on a principle now when you were sharing those lessons from the book, and you said never being, content or just satisfied with what you have. You should always aim higher, which leads me to my next question for you, right? We're all wondering, in your youth, there's always goals. It seems like it's a never-ending cycle of just, setting your goals, hitting them, and then setting other ones. So I just want to know from you, you've reached a point now that seems like a pinnacle to most people, to us students, to people who are already working, it seems like a pinnacle point. And I'm just wondering, do you have further aspirations for yourself? Can be in a different sort of industry, in a different space, but do you have, any more explorations, considering that you've reached such a pinnacle point in your career?
So no, I would disagree with you. I've not reached the pinnacle yet, because there's always more to do, right?
Yeah.
For me, when I pass away, I'm hoping that if I have a tombstone what will it say on my tombstone? I hope it will say, here lies a person who did his best, right? There's never a pinnacle. You're always trying to do something better and more. And if I think about my current job, I'd love to be able to hand Standard Bank on to the next leadership team in better shape than I found it, right? Because I think we should all be stewards, whether in our jobs, in our communities, in our family. And we've given a bequest, right? Your family's given you their name, their history, their traditions, their values. And your job in your family, your community, and in your business is to preserve that bequest, nurture it, and leave it in better shape for future generations. So I just hope that when I finish, the Standard Bank will be a better place. In practical terms, what does that mean? Well, we've just released our results, like you correctly pointed out, and we are aiming to have a return on equity by 2025 that is between 17 and 20%. And we're hoping that from 2025 onwards, that will be a higher ratio. How we're going to do that centers around us, on the one hand, becoming a truly digital organization, and on the other hand, becoming a truly human one. Getting people to meet their needs, their aspirations, their desires, using digital tools augmented by a profoundly human organization. And if we can achieve those things and get those financial outcomes while meeting people's needs, I would have done what I'm praying to do.
What you're trying to do.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you've done a very good job at that. I mean, the earnings that you've now recently announced are super great considering the impact of the pandemic. You know, you were able to have big balance sheet growth. And I think that's, you know, a very big applause to you, but I will get onto that later on. Right now, though, I want to ask you a bit about your banking career. So a lot of the students now here at the Witlock School of Economics and Finance are students who are studying and looking forward to, you know, having a career in banking. So I want to know from you, someone who's had a very extensive career in banking, what can you give us a bit of insight into your career in terms of like what was the biggest like memorable highlights, and you know, can you just give us a bit of insight into that?
There are a few actually.
Yeah.
So the one was Dr. Delizam, the Standard Bank Group, has built an incredible business, the Busamed Group of Hospitals, and he's trying to build a organization that is going to be one of the leading hospital groups on the continent. And I once met him in our building where he told me his dream and how he was going to build this business. And listening to him and having a view that Standard Bank could partner him, provide him with the finance, the capital, the advice, and to make this massive contribution. That was a huge highlight for me. The second highlight was Standard Bank in the 1990s and early 2000s. It aspired to be a leading emerging markets business. It wanted to operate outside the continent. But post the global financial crisis, we changed our view and said, actually want to be Africa focused. And today we say our purpose as Standard Bank is Africa is our home, we drive our growth. And the moment we made that choice where we were shifting the organization must be one of the most profound strategic moments in our group, where we said, okay, we're not going to be playing in emerging markets anymore. We're going to focus our attention on the continent, obviously using our base in Johannesburg as our headquarters, but we're going to drive growth in the 20 African jurisdictions where we are operative. That was a massive highlight for me. And the third one is the last one. The third one was my job is a fantastic job. It's a difficult job. There's lots of travel. There's lots of criticism. All you have to do is Google me and you'll see how much criticism I get. So it's a thankless task in many respects, but you also have many privileges. One of the great privileges was meeting Mr. Obama in the White House. There was a bunch of African business people that had the privilege of meeting with him, and I was one of them. And I have a picture of him in my study here where I'm a short guy, he's a tall guy, and I was shaking his hand. And that was a special moment.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely great insights, Mr. Sim. Yeah, but also I want to get into something that I feel has been applied in South Africa for a really long time. I'm sure this is in your mind. It's applied that has plagued the youth for a really long time. The problem that we have in this country of youth unemployment, right? Mr. Sim, you've recently now announced plans for, a digital mall, and obviously it's a very futuristic and forward-looking plan. And I think with any sort of like forward-looking plan and futuristic plan, the youth should be looked at, because the youth are the people who are going to carry that plan into the future. But currently, the youth of our country has been disempowered. We're facing a really huge crisis of youth unemployment. In fact, it has now recently been recorded as a world record, of percentage of youth unemployment. I just want to know from you, what do you think is the solution in this current economic climate, 2021, after everything has happened? What should the stakeholders in society be doing? Now that includes the governments, the banks, the big players in society and institution, and what should everyone be doing to face this crisis?
Yeah, that is a profound question, very profound. I think clearly, Mbali, the country's medium and long-term economic prospects depend on structural reforms, right? Everybody's been saying, whether you're a business person, community organizations, and you academics, the country needs structural reforms. And we need to lower the costs of doing business and improve the country's competitiveness. We need to improve the national competitive advantage of South Africa. Now, frankly, I'm in the camp that says actually there's been very encouraging progress on structural reforms in the last few months. What's the evidence? We've seen the partial sale of SAA. We've seen Ms. Darby at Transnet talking about businesses partnering Transnet in the refurbishment of our ports. We've seen progress at Eskom. We've seen progress on the release of the spectrum. And so there's a momentum, I think, that is gathering that will go some way, in my view, to addressing your question.
Yeah.
But faster growth, I think, is definitely the best way to make sure that graduates and the youth get absorbed into the economy. The beauty of the African continent, Mbali, is that we have the potential to unlock an incredible demographic dividend. But to unlock that dividend, we need a number of things to come right, in particular, education. And in particular, there has to be a greater interplay between the education institutions, business, and society. At Standard Bank, we try and do our bit. We've done everything in our power to accelerate job creation, entrepreneurship, and transformation. Just to give you a few statistics, we have 150 graduates that joined us in 2020, and I might just tell you that 87% of them were Black, and 58% were women. We have 480 learnerships that joined us in 2020. Of whom 262 were offered jobs by us at the end of their tenure. And all of these programs are focused on building a strong pipeline of skills for Standard Bank, but I think that makes a contribution to society. We also participate in the government's youth employment scheme. We've got 130 people. 90% of those, by the way, are women. We have, since 2017, we've contributed 47 million through a platform that we've got called Phoenix. You should Google it, by the way. And it's a crowdsourcing platform for funding students. We spent 5 million rand to support students with access to data and food vouchers during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. We got 36 Standard Bank bursaries. And so, yeah, that is sort of our attempt, our contribution to this notion that says, you've got to absorb as many youthful people into gainful employment. And importantly, the areas where we're growing as an institution require us to have as many people who've got skills in a whole range of academic and professional backgrounds. So lawyers, marketers, behavioral scientists, and indeed people from the business science, economists. And yeah, behavioral science, the economic sciences are very, very important in financial services.
Yeah. Sim, thank you for that insight into what Standard Bank is doing. I also just want to pick your mind on this in terms of if someone is at home, So if someone is at home, right, the youth, a lot of the youth is sitting at home, unemployed. A lot of conversation is driven around, education is the key to economic empowerment. However, in our country, that statement has proven to be not so true in some circumstances, So what would you say a young person sitting at home should be focusing on? Like, there's a lot of young people even struggling with access to education in some part, and those who are out of school struggling with employment. So what is something you think the youth itself should be focused on now? We're taking away from the government and the institutions in society, but now as a young person, what do you do then yourself? Do you have any words on that?
I think, first of all, this conversation is an important contribution to that dialogue. And so thank you for having me on this discussion. It's important, I think, for people to keep skilling themselves up. If you have got the imagination, imagine what the fourth industrial revolution requires, and imagine what South Africa needs to do to participate there, and then get the skills that will put you in a position to be competitive in that environment. In that context, you've got to follow your passion. But the types of skills that are needed, I think, in the fourth industrial revolution are the ones we've spoken about: data, artificial intelligence. The human sciences are actually quite important. In our business, for example, we need empathy. Whilst we need digitization, we need people that can understand, the impact of how people respond to stress. You've got to keep educating yourself on, for example, what it means to augment robots.
Yeah.
After robots have done all the basic things, the drudgery of the work, there's still the need for the human touch. So, for example, things like nursing are going to be quite important, because I still believe that for the next couple of 100 years, robots will not be able to have the empathy that humans have got.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to read a lot. Keep reading, keep understanding what are the issues, what are the trends, and then try and position yourself in those trends.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. To touch on, that's the inequality in our country. I'm sure we've seen, with the COVID-19 hit, this gap between the poor and the rich has been exacerbated, right? And I just want to know, and our Gini coefficient is one of the highest in the world, if not the highest. We have a really high levels of inequality in our country. I just want to know from you, what do you think we can do? And just, this is like, all stakeholders within society, how do we try and tip the scale to try and find balance? Now, what do you think should be done from that aspect to try and, tip the scale in the direction of balance?
Mbali, if you look at the macros for the second half of this year, I think we don't know what will happen, but I don't think there is a big risk of a dangerous new variant of COVID, right? I think that's unlikely, and therefore we expect the global economy to to continue to recover rapidly from the pandemic. I made this point in another context where I was debating this question with an interviewer and saying, look, we're in the middle of a major crisis, 1 in 100 years. Our generation has not seen anything like it. But you know, because you're an economist, that a couple of thousand years of economic history tells you that you've had the flu of 1918, the Spanish flu. You've had the plague, the Justinian plague in the 500s. You've had the Black Death in 1347. You've had the Antonine plague. So after all of these major plagues, things do revert to mean, right? To use the term that you guys would use, they do go back to normal. And our economy, the global economy and the South African economy, will revert to its mean as well. And in that context, we think the Chinese economy will grow at roughly 8.4% this year. The US economy will expand by 6.5%. The UK by 5.3%, and the euro generally by 4.4%. And in that context, that reflects the sharp contraction of 2020 and therefore a bounce in 2021. And then in the case of South Africa, we think, when we were doing our fun half-year results, we're thinking, well, South Africa will grow at 4.6% this year. Then we had the riots in July. We think it'll grow at roughly 4%. That is still incredible momentum. But in order for the country to grow at a higher trend rate than it currently is on, you need the structural reforms that I was talking about.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
What are those? Well, you need the SAA transaction to happen. You need the amendment of the electricity regulations to be effective, right? The ones that allow self-generation up to 100 megawatts. You need to continue improving the management of Eskom. You need Transnet to continue with its rollout of infrastructure, particularly fixing the ports. And you need to continue normalizing the relationship between the public sector and the private sector. Our own business, as you saw in our results, had a good half year, but you could see that a lot of our clients struggled post-COVID. We need to be continuing to assist our clients to get back on their feet, the small businesses that employ hundreds of people, continue to accelerate the country's growth. And as I said, you and I must play our role in helping the country become more competitive. And you need to be asking yourself and your colleagues, what's your role in helping the country be competitive? And my view is you continue to educate yourself, you continue to figure out how to position yourself as a professional and how to be competitive globally, not just in South Africa. That's it for that question, Mbali.
That's very great insight that you've just given us. And I think it'll be very useful information because these are very real issues that, are being faced by our country. And I think you're adding on your contribution to the conversation really makes a difference. I also just want to speak a bit about, let me see if we, so I also just want to speak about, the recent acquisition of Liberty Group that you guys just had. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What drove that decision to be made? And what are some of the positive consequences that the people of South Africa can expect to see from that, acquisition?
Excellent. So you're at Wits, right? Opposite there, you've got the Liberty building. Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
So Liberty is a great institution. It's got a great brand. In fact, when I grew up, I grew up in Rockville, in Morocco, and people used to say, if they want to buy insurance, they used to say they're going to buy Liberty. So Liberty is always, it's a bit like checkers, a bit like a plastic bag. So people always associated financial services, insurance with Liberty. It's a great brand and a great company. We've owned it 54% for a number of years now. And we thought to ourselves, well, it will be better for us to own it 100% so that we can complete our platform business. So we've got banking, we've got investments. Now we want to add asset management to our investments business and the insurance business, and therefore complete the value proposition that we offer to our clients. So when we give you a home loan, that's the banking bit. Then we can give you insurance, that's the insurance bit. And while we're talking to you at the same time, we'll say, well, how about we help you with your savings? So that's sort of the network of products and services we'd be able to offer. We think doing that with a Liberty brand inside the Standard Bank Group will therefore be better for our clients because we'll be more relevant to our clients. And that way we'll make more money for our shareholders. So relevant to our clients at the same time as we'll be making more money for our shareholders. In addition, Liberty employs a lot of actuaries, lots of actuaries, lots of economists. So there's lots of talent inside Liberty. So that talent will now be part of Standard Bank as well. And then lastly, they've got lots of IP, lots of know-how. And that know-how will then be part of the Standard Bank Group and will make Standard Bank even more competitive. And all of you should be wanting to work at Standard Bank as a result.
Very great that you say that. So I think we have about 5 minutes left of our session. Now pressing question that I also want to ask is regarding to your earnings. You've done incredibly well. I think considering the impact of the recent riots that we had and COVID-19 as well, it was very great to see that your bank was able to perform so well. Can you please tell us a bit about what were the driving factors and what do you think that you can continue upward this trajectory? Do you have are you confident in the economic recovery of South Africa post the pandemic? And do you think this is a slope that you'll continue rising going into the future, rising up on?
Yes, Mbali, I think banks are derived industries. So our activity arises as a consequence of what other people do. So when you want to purchase a house, or when MTN wants to buy plant and machinery, or when Barlows wants to refurbish its plant, etc., then you have a banking activity. We believe, as I've said to you earlier on, that the South African economy will continue to grow. So we take a long view. We also take a view that the African continent will continue to grow. Now, I've told you that Standard Bank is represented in 20 countries on the continent. We play a central role in each of those economies. And therefore, when those economies grow, we too are going to grow. Secondly, our results that we released that you're talking about reflect the recovery that has happened with consumers and SMEs and medium-sized companies and large corporates. That recovery, if COVID continues on the trajectory it is on, will continue to manifest itself in the Standard Bank results. We've positioned ourselves to continue to assist people in that context. So if you remember, when COVID hit, we gave a lot of people payment holidays, we extended their loans, we froze some of the repayments. And we believe that we stood by our clients and we will continue to stand by them post-COVID. As interest rates increase, bank profitability will also increase. As we continue our digitization of our services, as more and more people transact on those digital platforms, our earnings will continue to increase. And as we continue to manage our infrastructure better, our costs will remain well managed. And so I would say to you, we told our investors that by 2025, our return on equity will be between 17 and 20%. And on this trajectory, we think we will meet that promise to our shareholders.
Okay. So, Mr. Sim, I think I'm going to ask you a final question. I think very relevant to the youth as well, and also, government's interaction with the youth. A lot of you said it, now just in this interview yourself, that you believe, one of the solutions to this current economic crisis we're we're facing of youth unemployment is, to continue upskilling yourself and to continue reading, continue studying, and just those things. Do you think now, because government has really pushed the youth in the direction of entrepreneurship and starting their own businesses, but as we know, that's directly linked to how the economy of our country is doing, right? So when we have such high levels of poverty and, the things that are happening in the country, it can be very hard even for startups and, entrepreneurs in the country. And it can really be likened to trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while blindfolded. So I just want to know from you, do you think entrepreneurship is a viable solution for the youth in this country? And, would you push the youth to start businesses, keeping in mind of, how it could be in this current economic climate that we have,
Yes, Mbali. Yes. A lot of the great companies in the US, for example, were built either at the universities or by businesses that were adjacent to the universities, by young people. So think Steve Jobs, think Bill Gates, and so forth. Secondly, yes, entrepreneurship is underrated in South Africa. And I would beg people to be less reliant on what government does and focus on what they can do for themselves. I have the privilege of traveling to places like Lagos, Nairobi, etc. The number of young people making a plan, right? Not waiting for a handout, but making a plan is incredible. And now there's no reason why we should not have the same ambitions, the same drive, identify opportunities, tinker in the garage, figure out something new, go to the incubation center at Standard Bank, show them your idea, get them to fund it, etc. So yes, entrepreneurship is definitely the way to go. We're not doing enough of it as South Africans. Between business, the universities, the technicons, and government, we should be encouraging our people to innovate and be entrepreneurs. So you've hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, now this one is sort of like a follow-up. Do you think businesses, specifically the big institutions in South Africa, I know you outlined, now in this interview, the things that Standard Bank is doing currently, to empower the youth. And do you think businesses in South Africa are doing enough to give support? That is investor funds, VC funds, and all those things. And maybe outline a bit on what Standard Bank is doing to provide support to those SMMEs and startups?
So, Mbali, I would argue that, yes, there's always more that can be done by business. So that's sort of the answer to your question. That, yeah, probably we don't all do as much as we should. But in the case of Standard Bank, and I know our competitors do this, and other businesses do this as well. I've told you we invest in skills development, right? Vast amounts of money, and support smaller Black-owned businesses.
Yeah.
In Standard Bank in 2020, supplier. We spend a lot of money on Black attorneys, on Black collection agents. Supply development. There's organizations that I can tell you about that we've helped to develop. There's an organization called TC Architects. They are design architects, and they're 51% Black owned. We've spent, over 12 million rand on professional fees on this organization. There's engineering and electrical companies that we procure from and that we've supported. I told you about Busamed that we helped to build. Royal Bafokeng Holdings is one of the companies that we've helped to build. South Africa Taxi Holdings, a partnership with Santaco, is an organization that we've helped to build and develop. So I would say I can't speak on behalf of business, but I can tell you what Standard Bank has done.
Yeah.
And the list I've just given you is just tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Sim Tshabalala, thank you so much for joining us on this show. I really appreciate your value and your contributions to those conversations that we just had. It is of very great value, and it will make a lot of impact. So just to end off this interview, that was Mr. Sim Tshabalala, CEO of the greatest bank by assets in Africa. Mr. Sim, thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, and thank you to you and your colleagues, and I wish you all of the best. Thank you.